perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.
Find a plan that goes with your flow. Get unlimited local talk, text, and data at the most affordable rate with Unlimited Flow Postpaid, only at Docomo Pacific.
Wendy's Guam is back with a great meal deal. Their 2 for $8 deal is the perfect way to satisfy both your hunger and your wallet. Mix, match, and choose any 2 from the Dave's Single, Spicy or Classic Chicken, and 10-piece crispy or spicy nuggets. That's right. Pick any 2 for just $8 only at Wendy's. Good, done right. Cold Stone Guam's Very Berry Non-Dairy is very, very delicious. This creation is deliciously made with silk, chocolate, almond milk, strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries. Vegans and non-vegans alike will fall for this plant-based, vegan, dairy-free, and lactose-free frozen dessert made with silk, chocolate, almond milk. Cold Stone Creamery, the ultimate ice cream experience.
Kandit News is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Good evening, my dear friends. It is 5:57 p.m. on Thursday, February 2025. My name is Troy Torres, and the first thing that I'm going to ask that you do before getting into any of this show, any part of this show, is pray for Pope Francis and his health, his comfort, and his full recovery. You like my haircut? I got it today from Jessup Collins over at Royalty Cuts. It's just too darn hot to have long curly hair. Let me preface this show by saying that I believe, and I think most people would believe, that the government's use of eminent domain should be sparing, that the government should only use eminent domain when a vital or critical community interest demands it. And over the years, and it happens, eminent domain happens more often than you think. It's just, you only hear about it with this medical campus because it's just such a controversial topic for some people, and it has some pushback from a few doctors and some who have been vociferously opposed to anything Lulian Guerrero does. But eminent domain is used for a number of issues, sort of like when the government is going to pave a road and it finds out that the road has encroached on private property, and the government has been using it as a road all these years without ever compensating the private property owners. So like what happened with the expansion of the roads leading into Inarahan, or leading into the dump at Dundon, or what happened with the easement, the new easement, Magahaga Highway over at Tizen, a whole lot of eminent domain had to happen with things like that. And eminent domain happens a lot more often than we think it does, but it is a tool granted by the Organic Act that essentially says that the government can condemn land, can take land, but it has to compensate the private landowner at fair market value. I don't know if fair market value is the accurate term. I believe it's the accurate term, but I'm not sure. Good evening, Edward Bondicho, Mark Anthony, JD, and my prima Jan. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you all for joining in this show. So we have a situation where a medical campus is, the train has left the station. It's going to be developed in Mangilao. But there are some stumbling blocks for the governor to get over, and the chief among them is a federal lawsuit and a local lawsuit. The federal lawsuit was brought by Attorney General Doug Moylan, a local lawsuit by two of the landowners whose lands are being condemned via eminent domain. And that suit is being brought in the local court. And there's a sort of pause in one of those court cases to wait for the other court case to mature. And so the attorney, among the issues that the Attorney General has brought in the federal case is how Gura went about with this whole acquisition of the property, et cetera, right? So it's a lawsuit designed to doom the development of the medical campus in Mangilao. And part of what the Attorney General has said is this is about the rights of landowners. And I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning any sort of eminent domain that happens. It's part of the due process of this thing. It's part of, ensuring, we the public ensuring, and by extension, the Attorney General whom we elect, ensuring that things go the right way and that people's rights are not being trampled upon. And so, in due course, these things will be resolved in court. Is there a critical government function that is being addressed here? Absolutely. A new hospital is an absolutely critical government function. And for the past 2 decades, the experts have told us we need a new hospital. More than $100 million already has been obligated into this new hospital at a certain location. And according to the federal grantors and the covenants that have been established in the use of this money that has already been obligated right before the obligation deadline that already passed, it's got to be in Mangilao. It's got to be in this location. And so is there a vital public interest, both with the health of the people and also in consideration of the hundreds of millions of dollars that have already been obligated? Absolutely. So that passes the test. Are the land claimants or the landowners going to be paid at fair market value? According to the government of Guam, yes. A couple of the landowners are saying no, they want more. They believe that the land is worth more money and that the government has not fully considered all of the financial considerations here. All right. And so that's where a couple of the landowners are coming from. That's going to be worked out in court. So it's quite possible that the price tag for this thing could be more to compensate those two landowners. I believe it's Dr. Joel Joseph, the veterinarian, and there is a company that where the principal agents do not live in Guam, and they have this interest in, they have the ownership interest in one of those properties. I think I'm getting sick. Anyway, so you have that. And so you have one side that you have, on one hand, the Attorney General is fighting for the rights of these property owners. On the other hand, however, and this occurred to me a few days ago as I was recalling, I was going through my files about these about stories that we have written that we never had any closure to and that we need to follow up on. It was just going, it's thick. There's no way I'm going to get to all of them. But among them is a story that we've been covering for years, providing both news and editorial about this. And it is the lawsuit, the lingering lawsuit between the government of Guam and GWA on one side against Cortech International on the other side. And what this lawsuit essentially does, it was brought by the government of Guam. It's a lawsuit being litigated by the Attorney General. and also GWA and as an extension of the Attorney General. Started by the Department of Land Management, which means the Assistant Attorney General assigned to land management is in charge of this thing, okay? So it started in the Calvo administration. The final year, the final month of the Calvo administration, the Director of Land Management at that time, with the Attorney General, brought a lawsuit against Cortech, unprovoked. Cortech didn't do anything to provoke or to trigger this lawsuit. It just so happened that one day at the end of the Calvo administration, there's a lot of politics and behind the scenes stuff going on here, and that went on at the time between the owner of Cortech and some in the Calvo establishment. But that's neither here nor there when we're talking about this. But they sued for title to, I can't remember, I think it's lot number 10107 there's a lot number to it. It's a certain lot in Ukudu under which the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant sits. And GovGuam, through Land Management and the Attorney General, went in and sued Cortech in December of 2018, right before the Calvo administration left office. From that time until about a few months later, as this lawsuit was progressing, the GWA literally broke down a fence that was a barrier between the wastewater treatment plant lot and an adjacent lot that Cortech also owns, and moved the fence line, moved the property perimeter several meters, encroaching into the adjacent lot, so essentially stealing even more land. And that triggered Cortech for the first time to make a claim. So they counterclaim in the lawsuit, and they say, GovGuam, GWA, they now owe Cortech $200 million in damages, which would include back rent and damages for the encroachment, for the stealing of the land. None of that had to happen. None of it. Because Cortech didn't even so much as write a letter or make a phone call to GWA saying, you have to stop your operation of the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant if you're not going to start paying us rent and back rent for the use of that property, which is our property. Nothing like that happened until the counterclaim. See, what happened was this property, this lot number blah, 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 blah in Ukudu, and a bunch of other properties in Ukudu that Cortech now owns. Back in the day, several years ago, several decades ago, the Navy allowed the government of Guam to utilize that property because this is the former NICTAMS. The Navy allowed the government of Guam to use this property to operate a Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant. A whole bunch of different leases and lease agreements happened over the years. Fast forward to the 1990s when the property was returned by the Department of the Navy to the government of Guam. When properties returned to the government of Guam, the ancestral lands law kicks in. That land went into the ancestral lands inventory. The Ancestral Lands Commission, it's their job to process all of this stuff, to find the original landowner, and more than likely, the original landowner is already dead. And so now it goes into, now the property is being prepared for quitclaim deed to the ancestral landowners. And the ancestral landowners of this certain property that we're talking about, the wastewater treatment plant and the surrounding properties, it's a whole lot of property, was the Torres estate. I can't remember the name of the original Torres. This is a relative of mine. I didn't get anything out of this. Don't worry. I'm not conflicted in this. I do have to disclose, however, that I did work for Cortech for, I think, 3 months back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, before any of this became an issue, just so you know. I have no interest in Cortech. I was a salaried employee at the time. We don't have any advertising from Cortech, and my relationship with them was 10 years ago. But I need to disclose that anyway. So you have Ancestral Lands Commission deeding the property to the Torres estate. GWA doesn't say a damn thing. They don't say, hey, wait, we have a claim, even though our ownership interest in this lapsed a few years ago because we forgot to do something with the maps, which is a whole other story, right? So they have, they have this, GWA says nothing when the property is deeded to the Torres estate. The Torres estate sells the property with the permission of Judge Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to Unex Corporation. GWA, GovGuam say nothing about their ownership interests at this point. And then back in 2016, somewhere thereabouts, Unex defaults on something with Cortech. Cortech ends up purchasing the property for more than $100 million. And it very clearly in the maps and in the descriptions of this stuff, when you look at the land records, includes this lot under which the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant sits. That sale went uncontested by GWA and by the government of Guam. So you have Cortech utilizing more than $100 million to purchase all of this land, the value and price of which includes the land where the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant sits. And then 4 years later, December 2018, without any provocation, all this time, Cortech is just allowing GWA to utilize this property, not charging any rent, not making any demands for anything, just completely undisturbing GWA. Also, as Department of Revenue and Taxation and Land Management, the very agency that sued Cortech, Land Management certifies the tax rules, the property tax rules. Land Management tells DRT that Cortech is the owner of this lot under which the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant sits. And so therefore, Revenue Tax, you need to charge Cortech the assessed property taxation based on these rules. And so from the year that Cortech, and all the public property tax records show this, from the year that Cortech acquires this property up through today, even through this litigation that continues on, Cortech is identified by the Department of Land Management and the Department of Revenue and Taxation as the owner of the property, has assessed property taxes on Cortech, and Cortech every single year pays these property taxes. So as that happens, in December of 2018, Department of Land Management says, no, that's our land. We want to quiet title to this. Goes to court. GWA joins in the lawsuit after the counterclaim by Cortech. And me saying that Cortech owns this property is not just my opinion. 2 or 3 years ago, and during the course of this litigation, Judge Elise Riarty issues a decision and order that says unequivocally that Cortech owns this property. That leads to a flurry of legal maneuvers by GWA and by the government of Guam, the Attorney General's office, that continues today in a bifocal effort in both the Superior Court and the Supreme Court of Guam. There's all of these technical things that are going on. Meanwhile, you have, on the one hand, the Attorney General fighting for the property interests of private landowners against eminent domain, where they are going to be compensated. And on the other hand, you have the Attorney General in court fighting against the private property interests of a private landowner that paid for that property multi-millions of dollars in a lawsuit that, if the government prevails, would mean that Cortech would lose all of that money that it invested into that property. So which is it? Do we appreciate private landowner interests, or do we not appreciate private landowner interests? And I realize that this is not apples to apples, because we're talking about eminent domain versus an actual stealing of property by the government of Guam. What we're talking about is apples to an apple tree, with the Cortech interest being the apple tree. We're talking about several degrees more of apples that are being dealt with here. And so I find this not just ironic of our government, but highly hypocritical. Because if you're going to be against the condemnation of private property of 2 parcels in Fadian, Mangilao, for which, number one, there is an expressed critical purpose for the land taking, and probably more importantly, compensation for the landowners. But you're not going to say anything about this other property that's significantly more money, number one, and probably the most important part of it in comparison, the government of Guam offers no compensation for the land taking. It's just going to be a taking through the court. Well, and I doubt that the government of Guam is going to prevail in this case, considering that Judge Elise Uriarte already has ruled that this land belongs to Cortech. But here's the thing. If the government of Guam wanted to make this apples to apples, it could do something very simple. It should have done something as simple as this from the beginning. They shouldn't even have made a deal out of it. This lawsuit didn't have to happen. They could have just operated the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant without any encumbrance, without anyone bothering them, because Cortech wasn't bothering them for years, wasn't asking for anything, was paying the property taxes on it for the government of Guam. Basically, giving the government of Guam money where the government of Guam should have been paying Cortech money. But this is how, if they wanted to just make it official, they could have rectified this whole situation. They could have condemned the land. They could have said the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant serves a critical function to our community, and it does. And without our ownership of this plant, our bond covenants, our GWA bond covenants would be in jeopardy, because we would not be able to honestly tell the bondholders on our bonds that we own this asset. Our military buildup funding and the Mamizu funding from Japan, from the government of Japan, would be in danger, because we need to provide the Navy and the government of Japan with assurances that we are able to operate this wastewater treatment plant unencumbered by any problems to title. And they could have done eminent domain with that property. And fair market value on a piece of property where a sewer treatment plant sits probably would have been a whole lot less than the $200 million counterclaim that Cortech has against the government of Guam as a result of the original claim, stupid claim that the government of Guam made. But why is the Attorney General protecting the land interests of one group of people and at the same time trying to bust the land interests of another group of people? And how is it right that the land interests that we're trying to protect would go against the building of a hospital, and the land interests we're trying to bust is so we can save a sewer treatment system? In the comparison of the priorities and what's most important objectively to the majority of our people, here's the hospital, here's the sewer treatment plant. We can't do without both. But what I'm saying is, this doesn't make sense, and it is completely hypocritical. At some point, I think if the Attorney General, doesn't withdraw this lawsuit before the government of Guam is on the hook for paying Cortech $200 million, maybe the legislature needs to get involved to do something about this. Maybe the governor needs to get involved to do something about this, to order her agency, the Department of Land Management, to stand down. And if GWA wants to continue this lawsuit on its own, it would do it without the original bringer of the suit, which is the Department of Land Management, which happened under the previous administration, and most likely for political retributive reasons against Cortech, because some people in the Calvo administration just didn't like Ho Yun, the owner of Cortech. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful and blessed day. God bless you, and I love you all, and hope you love my haircut.
We got that dynamite. We got that dynamite.
Find the perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.